For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tapia, and I'm one of the co-chairs here with MobileMonday. Mike Rowell is one of the founders. I don't know where Mike's over there. And also we have Kate Inbach, who just replanted from Boston. And so the three of us kind of coordinate this every month. So if you guys, if you're interested in sponsoring or have an idea for an event, feel free to pull us to the side at the end and we can chat. So tonight, 2010, the year in review, mobile review, and also we'll talk about our 2011 predictions. The panelists, I guess some of them don't need an introduction, but we'll go ahead and we'll start this out with, we'll go one by one, starting with the guys closest to me, and just say your name and who you're with and kind of what you do. Yeah.
I'm Malik from GigaOm, and I write.
Rich Wong, Accel Partners. It's good to see everybody here.
Matt Figgs, Vodafone Ventures. We're the strategic venture capital arm of Vodafone.
Joe Jasin, DNA Partners. We invest in IP communication companies and digital media distribution, and we focus on USA and China. Once again, it's DNA Partners.
John Malloy, Blue Run Ventures. I'm just a mobile guy.
Cool. All right. So for the panel, this just do a quick raise of hands. How many people here are developers? Actually, write code. Come on. Really? Okay. Product marketing. Business development. Okay. Legal. How many people here from the journalists, media? Anybody reporting? All right. Okay, we got a couple people coming. Cool. Okay, how many developers are actually working on iPhone stuff? Really? Okay. And Android? Well, Palm. More. So Windows Mobile. Okay. Symbian, Java. BlackBerry, yeah. Who's doing BlackBerry stuff? All right.
He's in the wrong ballroom.
All right. So it kind of gives you a good demographic of kind of who's doing what. And I don't know what the rest of you. What are the rest of you guys doing? You're not developers. You're not. Okay. Okay. How many people are drunks here? Okay, it's interesting. So who else is? So developers. Who else are you guys?
Angels. You missed angels.
Angel investors. Okay. Looking for a good idea. Okay. All right. So anyway, I guess I'll kick it off. Emailing the panelists, and I just send basically a lot of verticals. So we're going to cover from social to music to advertising, augmented reality, kind of get their take on what happened in 2010. It comes definitely from the VC perspective because they always watch where the money's going, and also from the journalism perspective, kind of see what's making the news. So kind of the first topic, guys, we want to cover was social. Definitely, social is a big trend, web and mobile. But kind of what have been the most important trends to you this year that you see? And feel free to chime in in no particular order. Don't be shy. Okay, you got it. Yes. You always have an opinion.
Yeah, of course. I think the big social trend is the rise of Facebook mobile. I think that is the single biggest trend of 2010, and it's actually been underreported. It's one of the more underhyped stories of 2010, and the Facebook recent single sign-on is an equally important process, product launch, which will basically streamline a lot of personalization of applications and mobile web services. I think those are the two key developments of 2010. While people have been obsessed with the Android story, the real story on mobile is actually Facebook, because Facebook does what Google's Android doesn't do. It actually marries mobile to people. And the reason mobile works is it's about people, and it's always been about you, the person, and Facebook kind of understands that dynamic really well. So I think that is the most important story of 2010. And I think we will see more and more of that going forward. I think the other big story is how two really basic services from the web are basically the reason why smartphones are selling. One is Twitter and the other is Facebook. I mean, there isn't really a killer mobile app which has come out and become so dominant. It's the killer web apps which have adapted to the mobile. So those were the three things, in my opinion, that happened during 2010 from a social perspective.
Rich, do you have anything?
Just to be slightly argumentative about the structure of, I actually think that what makes some of those services successful, and I totally agree with Owen, by the way, about the importance of Facebook mobile. I think actually Facebook Places is going to be the most important aspect of that, because there's so many points to attach from in terms of startup companies that are building on top of the location database, those Facebook Places. But for a lot of Mobile Mondays and a lot of us that have been going to these mobile conferences, we often slice stuff up by functionality and by category. Social companies, augmented reality, location companies, MMS companies, EMS companies, et cetera. And I think when you look at Facebook Mobile, it's not just a, quote, social app. It takes advantage of a fairly wide range of these technology capabilities, location and otherwise. And I think it's the blending of that that actually makes it a great application. And so I think this is the comment I'd make, I think, is it used to be that you could define a lot of the mobile companies by their technology category. But I think now the transformative mobile companies are ones that are taking advantage of a range of different technologies and weaving them together well, just as we talk about the different things tonight.
Got it.
To set a different tone here is I look at the mobile industry. I try to through an international marketplace, and Cyworld in Korea has been a social network. It was founded in 1999 and launched mobile and desktop at the same time at that point, and then SK Telecom bought them in 2001, 2002. So it is a phenomenon that Facebook has the reach of 500 million and approximately 200 million social members that are using mobile, but it's not a phenomenon in other parts of the world. And I think if we dice it up into a USA perspective of what's new or what happened in 2010, I think some great verticals came out. Government allowed social networks to start implementing their own, healthcare. So I just think it's great that these other verticals, other than consumer orientation, came out and did their own social networks.
And I would just add one thing on this Facebook story, since most of you are developers. I actually don't think it's that much good news for you. I think that developers need to look at Facebook as to what they've become, which is really like they're becoming the dominant mobile carrier in the world. They're becoming a dominant communication carrier. And so when you are thinking about what you're going to build on, what you're going to do, you have to realize that their model is not necessarily a good model for you. And that's a big change, I think, the biggest change in Facebook that I've seen in the last year.
Which exactly proves my point that 2010, Facebook mobile was the real story. I think people are, again, getting confused by things like places or individual functionality, whereas Facebook is all about personalizing your mobile experience. In many ways, it's like going back to the roots of mobile. Your phone used to be a very personal device. Now you have Facebook personalizing it based on your community, your friends, and your social network. I think that is the most important thing, and I disagree with you on the Facebook being a US phenomenon. That is quite not true. If you really look at Facebook and Twitter, in recent 6 months, about 20% of Twitter's growth has come from Indonesia and India. Those two markets.
I'm well aware that the
So-
subscribers of Facebook are
Right.
70% international. I mean, it's a phenomenon in the US that we have that many mobile users using one of our products and services.
But they're using the same service overseas as well. I think if you look at some of the newer devices which have come to market, like the Nokia X3, which have integrated, Facebook experience into basically a $40 feature phone, I think Facebook is a phone, a feature people want in their phone. There is the devices which are being sold by some of the young people like the low-end Android phones. So I think that is the big story, and I think they're just bypassing everybody, as you said, on the communications layer. So from an application developer standpoint, it is actually a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it lets you personalize your app very quickly to your social graph. But it's a bad thing, you're going to be like a parasitical application developer. You don't have a big opportunity based on it. So that's a big challenge. And I think somewhere in between those two extremes, there is an opportunity to find like a big part of growth.
Okay, guys, let's move on to the next topic. Augmented reality. So we saw companies like Wikitube, Layer, got a lot of attention this year. What are the important trends? I do think that augmented reality, there's a big future in that. So I just want to take your, and it's just barely emerging with the information that we have and capabilities of devices. But I really think that this will definitely find its way into automobiles and a lot of part of our life. So you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is accurate. It's still very nascent, early days. So we've been tracking augmented reality most of this year. We've looked at a lot of companies in this space in Europe and in Asia, but there's a big gap between what people are showing in their presentations. You know, they can come out with a nice video, and then from that, making the leap to an actual device and seeing something really exciting and useful. It's not quite there. So for us, we're still looking at it. We potentially do an investment, but it needs a lot more. There's a lot more development that needs to happen.
I think it's innate. It's going to happen whether we want it or not. I think we look at 2010 as a year of Avatar 3D. It's a video 3D. There's a company down in LA doing audio 3D. They can place a raindrop in one of your seats. One raindrop in one of your seats. I think it's just the next is spatial 3D, which would be augmented reality. So video, audio, spatial.
I think that augmented reality is kind of a techie thing that we talk amongst ourselves a lot about, but it's not unlike what location is like. We talked about LBS 8 years ago. It's important. It's going to be important, but when it really becomes important, it's pervasive and it's horizontal, right? And so when you look at the stuff that's out there today, there's not a lot to it. So the more interesting thing to me is, okay, if it's coming, what do you do about it? And Rich and I have talked about this on another panel a year or two ago. I think that you need to find the data sets that are out there that matter. The reason that it's not that interesting now is because you don't really know what you're going to do with it. There's data sets that you can start to identify that are going to be very important in the future. I'll give you one example. So with the new interconnected, with these device capabilities are now pretty much pervasive, at least in this country or in North America. You can actually start to harvest kinds of information that was never possible before, and the carrier's not in the way. And so for me today, and this is not a promo, but we're investors in a company called Waze. And all Waze is it's an interconnected network. You become a probe. So for you VCs out there, it's Dash without the hardware model, right? It's soft, taking the advantage of software, leveraging the ability of the crowd to get data on, basic mapping data, and as a service, you just give traffic, real-time traffic information to people. Why is that important? That data set's important. You now have this ability to actually get to a pretty valuable data set. I think in the area of augmented reality, though there are similar opportunities, there's capabilities in the devices that are reasonably pervasive where you can actually identify, start to build pretty good repositories of information that someday are going to matter. But they're probably not going to matter until it's the market's much more penetrated, which is probably 3 to 5 years from now. But you really have to start identifying them now. Identify your community and start to build these sort of powerful oil wells, if you will, or look for these repositories of information, that are going to be built by these ad hoc behaviors of edge devices.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it depends on how visionary you go or how forward-looking in terms of the definition of augmented reality. I think exactly as John says, a good traffic application is, in my opinion, augmented reality, or a good set of check-in services or location information or a form of augmented reality. The current sort of vision videos and slides remind me a lot of the famous Starbucks coupon that people talked about in mobile advertising for about 10 years. We sort of made that up at phone.com in the early days to sell web gateways, which didn't work out so well, by the way, sorry about that. But the idea has never actually happened, right? I mean, for the most part, only until recently with some of the check-in guys has that Starbucks coupon finally started to occur. And so I feel like the vision is well-intentioned, this sort of idea of you hold up the phone in Union Square, but I think it's sort of off. I think it really is sort of, I think similar to what John says, the building up of all of these digital and virtual data sets that really are valuable. And so when you get a tip from Facebook Places or Foursquare, in my opinion, that is augmented reality. And I think you're going to start to see those data sets get richer and richer to the point you have real liquidity of those data sets. And that's how it's going to occur, not by everybody kind of holding up their phones to see, who's available in this room who's single right now. I think I'm there on sorry. Others that might do that.
I think from a purely hardware and bandwidth perspective, I mean, if you just take those two vectors, the processing power isn't going to be there till 2014, 2015, when you actually have dual core processors become mainstream. And from a bandwidth perspective, you won't have anything till at least 2013, 2014. So I think definitely as more wireless bandwidth and faster processors become available, I think all that kind of data processing which is needed for augmented reality is definitely going to happen. But I think we're definitely 2013, 2014 is when you actually see the actual use case emerge. Up until then, it'll just be like a nice experiment. Yeah.
Cool. So kind of segueing from Rich's comments about advertising. So advertising. So we saw a lot of consolidation, acquisitions. So let's talk a little bit about those, and also some of the innovation in mobile advertising, because it's been pretty lame actually. There's been a lot of banner ads. So there's been some innovation this year. Kind of see what you guys have thoughts on those.
You know a thing or two about that.
Well, look, there's a lot of folks that worked on AdMob in the room, and so I was a very small part of it, sitting on the investor side. But I think a lot of people think of, I think the AdMob Google acquisition, the acquisition of AdMob by Google, and then the Quattro consolidation by Apple obviously was an important watershed event in the industry. But I think what I firmly believe is, to use the Turner phrase, it's just the end of the beginning in the mobile advertising space. When those companies, when AdMob, Quattro, NPocket, NPocket started a little earlier, but Quattro and AdMob and Millennial Media were started, the iPhone didn't exist, and Android was not shipping at any level of volume. It was only in the last 2 years that the substrate, the ingredients have improved so much. And so I personally believe there's going to be another renaissance in the mobile advertising space, the so-called mobile ad 2.0, because the volume and the capabilities improve so dramatically. I think there are going to be many more successful companies. Be slightly promotional. I think Jim had mentioned, I did invest, Owen was kind enough to cover it, in a company called MoPub, Jim that spoke earlier, which is a bunch of AdMob and Google alums. And I think there are going to be great companies built in the space that are going to take advantage of the known gaps of millennials and AdMobs and the jump taps of the world. And I think there's going to be some great businesses built there. So I do believe it's going to be an exciting space.
I think one of the big things which I've observed in 2010 and maybe in 2009 as well is that people are looking back to predict the future. They're just looking at the models which worked on the web and just saying maybe we are going to use that. And that's why AdMob and all these services have such terrible click-through rates, and they just have they're like just a horrible user experience. If anybody who's played Android, version of Angry Birds, why you're angry, and there are games, there are games where you have the pause button right underneath the ad so that you can get some click-through. So these are like you're using web thinking on the mobile, and you're using thinking from a 12 keypad device on a device which has all kinds of human capabilities. It's got sensors which can sense and which you can touch it, and you can do a lot more with it. So why is it that it's 2010, we have some of the smartest people working for Google and for Apple with PhDs from here to Timbuktu, and they can't come up with an advertising experience which is compelling to the user. Right? That's the thing. People would watch great advertising if it was compelling and if it is not advertising. I think people have not even thought about building experiences or brand experiences based on the mobile platform. I think that is why you see things like, when you see a Zipcar app or a Starbucks app, I see that, I said, this is where the advertising, the end of advertising is about to start, because brands are forming direct relationships with individuals, and that's the end of advertising as we know it, and Madison Avenue is still not grokking it. And a lot of, the Google guys are not grokking it. I mean, they should be, but they're not. Like they just want to put the damn banners up there, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, I know it's like not.
And that's why there's so much opportunity. I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many needs yet to be met. It's just the early beginning, and the game has just started. So the people that are saying, "Oh, the mobile ad business is over," that's why this.
We had spent $100,000 on the GigaOm app, and we got $300 back in advertising. I mean, it's like, what's the point?
So we need an ad optimization solution.
We killed the damn ad. It's like free is even better, right? At least happy customers mean brand loyalty versus just making, pennies on like pretty pointless stuff.
Well,
Right?
could cross-platform make a difference? Could tablet
Yeah.
make a difference in
No.
this?
I think not the way this is. Not the way this is. The advertising as we know it on the mobiles today is not going to work, because it didn't work on the web. How the hell is it going to work on the mobile? Right? Web is about like trillions and trillions of page views. On the mobile, you have limited amount of page views, limited amount of interaction, and then you have an ad system which actually comes in the way of what you're supposed to do with an app or with a website. I think that is a huge problem. Doesn't matter how many platforms you put it on, it will be an issue. I know.
Any
I have strong
IPTV
opinions
success
about
stories? No, I'm curious. Any IPTV success stories?
IPTV. I mean, I thought this was a mobile Monday.
I know, but it's all
We
integrated.
can talk about it later.
Full screen. No, so I mean, the broader theme obviously is monetization. So we've been looking at, we have an investment in a company called Amobi. 2009 was a tough year. 2010, much better year. 2011, they're hoping to grow 100 to 200%. We also made an investment earlier this year in a virtual goods monetization company called PlaySpan. Similar story. This year was a good year. Next year, hoping to grow over 100, maybe even 200%. So it's an obvious theme for every developer, right? Is okay, we can get to a million downloads, which is actually a pretty useless number. It's sort of like saying we got 1 million hits to my website. But how many ad impressions are you driving, or how many virtual goods are you selling? What's the ASP look like? How are you monetizing your users? So I think it's going to be a huge theme, right? We're approaching towards 500,000 applications through the App Store. Android is going to have hundreds of thousands, maybe even the same number, maybe even more. So how does this ecosystem, how do people start to actually make money? Aside from a few people, small companies doing pretty well for themselves, how are we going to grow big companies from this?
So I guess some of the takebacks is advertainment. So I did see at least a lot of iPhone apps that were ads built into an application. So that's the stuff I've seen, I think, in 2010, and some of the audience would agree as well. But also another question here, guys, is because you look at least on the monetization side, I think mobile advertising became mainstream, meaning brands. It wasn't 10K investment, 50K investment. They were getting their toes wet. They were actually jumping in the pool now and doing real budget. And I don't know if you guys had the same thoughts. Is that what you're seeing as well with some of the companies you're funding? Is that the brands are actually throwing big money at this?
I think Madison Avenue is definitely trying to. I think where there's opportunity is in the back end of the billing. When you're a campaign manager, I think, or at an advertisement firm, you're buying campaigns from all these different sources, and there's no reporting on the back end to figure out where is your best click-through rate coming from. So it's all front end right now, there's no back end.
What I actually say is, I think, to be accurate, I think most of the agencies and brand managers are not putting it as a line item, even in their digital budgets yet. Which is actually why I'm so optimistic, because you're getting, whatever the numbers are, you're getting to about $1 billion probably in the US on a run rate basis in advertising, mobile advertising. But that is before actually people have actually made it as a core part of their spend. So that's why, again, I think you're going to see order of magnitude growth for the next couple of years, because I think it will start to become part of the lineup. So it always sort of amuses me a little bit to you watch, normal Sunday football advertising, and how many Twitter and Facebook buttons you now see at the end of the ads, and how almost everybody is now driving people to a Facebook, a fan page, rather than a generic website. I remember seeing that transition in sort of the 99-2000 period, where everyone would, for the first time, put up a www site. And I think you're going to start to see that speed of engagement change on the mobile side as well in the next couple of years. That's my optimism.
I think the big issue, if you really think about it, is the whole idea of advertising has to change, right? I think there is a reason why Groupon said no to Google this week. It's just like the idea behind advertising, there's two kinds of advertising. One is to drive brands, which is a whole different experience. That's why you have companies like Flipboard, which actually do have a shot at building a new kind of an advertising experience. But then there is the other performance advertising. And you look at something like Groupon, which is actually creating performance advertising at a level which has never been created before. It's actually forcing people to take action. Now, if you use the same analogy, there was this gentleman looking for people for Macy's. Once I have the Bloomingdale app on my iPhone, I don't really need them to put an ad in the newspaper or anywhere else. They can send me directly, once they know what I'm buying or what I'm looking, they can, there he is.
Notifications.
Yeah, so you can actually, that is a better ad experience, because at the end of the day, the ad has two reasons to exist, right? One is to basically create recognition for a brand, and the other thing is to drive sales. So driving sales on the iPhone or Android or any other personal device makes it so much simpler for brands to go directly. And it's the same way, developing brands, I think brand advertising on these devices, that would be an interesting opportunity for somebody to go chase. I don't know, do you have something in your portfolio I can write about tomorrow?
Jeff, you already wrote about the one.
We have a question from a brand, so I'd like to hear what they
That's
have.
the Federated guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Getting the app on the phone, that's just the beginning of the battle. It's not as easy as that, because once you get it on there, you're right back to the old clutter. People have so many darn apps on their phone, you have to then leverage other platforms to remind them that the app's there. If your app, or you have to build in something that's so darn compelling in the app and constantly update it to make sure that people are always going to come back to that application. And when you look at what's happening these days with developments nationwide, you look at what's going on with these cross-platform app publishing tools, I think that's where you need to look at this cross-platform. Everyone's been focused on the darn iPhone because AdMob put out a report that says, oh, all the traffic's from iPhone because AdMob says, it is. AdMob's traffic is all iPhone. And people missed out on the larger market. So from our side, everyone's going, oh, but mobile's only this big. Well, because we're not building a large enough base. So people are not coming with good cross-platform solutions, and they're not being able to justify them from a business perspective. So the returns they're seeing are small relative to the larger business. And so from a brand perspective, if you can show a larger pot of money out there and show us how to get it, then we're very interested. But, the Madison guys are all pitching iPhones.
And by the way, if I could just say, the reason why this is so important, right, it's one of the few monetization models that you can access as a startup company, right? You can sell on the App Store, you can sell a subscription model, and then there's a number of gaming companies that are making mobile virtual goods starting to work. But for the vast majority of other people, it's going to be ultimately an ad-supported model. This will be a key part of how they make money. And so if people can crack this eCPM problem and drive it from whatever the market clearing price is, 60, 70, 80 cents, depending on which country you are on a CPM basis, and lift that by 2, 3, 4x, then you can start to build at least interesting medium-sized businesses on an ad-supported basis. And again, back to the premise, I think that's why I think there's going to be a bunch of other really interesting mobile ad companies over the next 3 to 4 years. So I'd love to take a look at those for anybody starting with that.
Cool,
Don't
guys.
send it to these guys.
All right.
You can send them to me though. So the one, we're friends. The one thing that I would point out though is that since we're talking about advertising itself, it's too broad a topic for me to be that interested in. You need to sort of get to the specifics. And so since we're talking about monetization, the pay per download model is kind of what everybody's been using. And the real truth of 2010 is that's really broken, right? That doesn't work. We're spending lots of money for impressions to get ourselves up on a list that's killing us, right? It's killing adoption of our app. That's a place where I think there really can be innovation. I think a paid download model that has not been defined yet that absolutely is a yawning need. And I think that's what developers really need kind of in the near term, just to get themselves a foothold. Advertising, I mean, I think it's going to take a longer time. I mean, just another sort of quick mention, if you know, Mary Meeker's slides just came out, and the one slide that really stood out, and she talked about time spent versus ad spend. And the one area that was underrepresented, the only growth opportunity in advertising generally in her broad categories, which didn't include mobile, was internet. So if internet's there, if internet's still, still a growth area, mobile's not even on the chart yet. So I don't think, even though there is more brand advertising today than there ever was, and I've definitely been too early in this category, we're not even registering on the chart yet. Like we're really not a line item in the digital budget. We're just like, I gotta have, I don't know why. And so it's gonna take a while for us to, it took the internet a long time to get there. It's gonna take us a long time.
So this is where I do my frivolous plug for GetJar. It offers pay-per-download. So if you guys at a good discount rate, so GetJar.com.
That's an existing one, just to be clear. There's other models that have to emerge, is what I said.
All right, guys, we got to move it on. Let's hold on audience questions till the end of the round. So if you guys have your favorite panelists, they want to ask questions, let's wait till we're done. Kind of move it along. So games, gaming this year. What new surprises did we see? Did a very large company just pop up out of Potrero Hill this year? I don't know, planted that seed. So and also is social gaming a fad? Comments?
So I've invested in games. It's a hard business. It looks easy from the outside, but it's a tremendous amount of work to make a Zynga. It's very hard to make another Zynga. There's there is a scale that they've achieved, and they're trying to leverage that scale, but that is, it's not a panacea by any means. Where I think gaming is interesting is, and this is not necessarily new in 2010. It's been new for a couple years. Game mechanics are very interesting, and so I think all developers in this room are interested in engagement, and so there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and so I don't think that's a fad at all. I mean, I think engaging your audience, fundamentally a mobile device is still a time-killing, quasi-entertainment device. That's really what we use it for, so give them something they want to do. Games obviously are a hook, repetitive behavior, giving them a benefit, make them come back. So when you say, are games important? I think they're very important to mobile developers in general, and they'll continue to be. I don't know that you're going to build another Zynga.
I think a lot of us have looked at.
I think overall it's just a crowded space from the desktop world to the handset world, and we have to remember Zynga is a desktop company. Yeah, it's ramping up in mobile, but right now it's a desktop company. So I just think overall it's a crowded space that's difficult to make money anywhere in the world.
A company like DNA, Japan?
That's I think that's a different user case, kind of like Cyworld in the sense where you're kind of locked into a carrier's ecosystem, and they're cultivating that community within their own ecosystem, kind of like Apple.
And that's why I guess I just have a little more optimism. I think if you look at the income statements of a Dina Group or a Mixi or a Gree, which are Japan-based mobile social networks, they're astounding in terms of the amount of profits they make. It's sort of similar to how one might look at a Playdom or a Zynga. Now, there's all these reasons that those of us that are mobile geeks can explain. Handset fragmentation, you don't have flash on a ubiquitous basis, processor power, et cetera, et cetera. But on the presumption that ingredient technology maybe it'll take 3 to 4 years, but that technology will get there. Some of the early numbers you're starting to see of these, really interesting social game guys are definitely raising our eyebrows. We're definitely interested in the category. Whether it's durable, there are all the normal challenges I think that are rightly explained about how hard it is to repeat the studio hit business of a great game company. But I think it's certainly an area that we are hoping to discover what the next Playfish or Zynga or Playfish is in.
But to put a fine point on sort of the 2 points, the download model's broken, or so where we are today, the best app the best app today is Angry Birds, and if you look at just sort of Angry Birds as a standalone business, it's a great they've done well for themselves, but that alone is not going to be Zynga. right? So so from the mobile space, it's hard to see a hit game take off and you're able to like turn it into, your Texas Hold'em. I just haven't seen, that opportunity for a lot
Can't
of
make a
reasons.
record label out of a one-hit wonder.
Well, Mario, does GetJar have any great feature phone games that are just a hit in India? I mean, that just on and on and on that are making revenue?
Well, revenue for the user, yeah, there's ad revenue. Yeah,
Ad revenue?
we got tens of millions of downloads per second.
It's interesting that you all are talking from the VC perspective. Just want to bring that,
Yeah,
right?
we have
Make it very clear, because as an individual app developer, if you have a hit like Angry Birds, life is pretty darn good. Just saying. I speak for the little guy.
All right. So let's talk about, so moving on from games, let's talk about location. So this year, I mean, definitely, who joined Foursquare this year? Actually added download, Foursquare users. GoWallet. Who's using GoWallet? Wow. Who checks in using the Facebook check-in stuff? Oh, actually, wow. So it kind of gives you an idea, right? A lot of people this year started joining these check-in communities, and also using the native stuff built into Facebook. So kind of what are your thoughts, in regards to location, and also what are other events location related that kind of got on your radar? Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
What's the vote?
Break the
What's
ice.
the official vote?
Break the ice.
The Vodafone point of view? Thanks, Rich. So I mean, thanks for the intro. No, I mean, so we haven't done any investments in this space. There's been a series, obviously, people have been talking about location-based applications for a long, long time. So there's Wave Market, then there's Loot. So come and go right now. It's Foursquare, and we'll see what the next thing is. For a lot of it, for us, we see it as an important feature now. Everybody provides it. It's basically a commoditized service. So I don't think you can have just a standalone company that says, well, we've got location information or some piece of it. It's got to be much more built out. But there's a bunch of interesting companies. So mobile commerce, for example, other ways of leveraging location information and building something on top of that. There can be a lot of value, but just purely saying, well, we're a location-based company, that doesn't get you very far.
Just out of curiosity, did anybody go to South by Southwest this past year? Just by show of hands. I don't know if you guys used, I know Charles did, so I was drinking inserts with it. But if you actually use one of the check-in apps when you're at South by Southwest, you actually would start to see what it means when you have full liquidity. When people, like everybody that you're kind of hanging out with is using it, how powerful it can be. And that you'd be sitting there at dinner and you wouldn't have to plan any of your activities that evening. When you're finished ordering your dessert or whatever, then you would sort of see where everybody else was going. And it would really be these, I think Howard Rheingold wrote the book Smart Mobs, with the idea of you literally sort of end up where everyone else was, that everyone else was there because that's where everybody else was going. It's really quite fascinating to actually see it from a sociological perspective. Inside, I would say, to use that specific event as an example, the check-in apps offer real utility. I don't know if they're going to be great standalone companies. I actually think that they probably won't. It's my guess. But I think that the power of having all of your friends using it with proper privacy controls and everything else is going to be really, really compelling. And when you start looking at the local offer market, the Groupons and Living Socials and the otherwise, you can start to see how those two worlds can come together to create something really, really interesting. So I'm a big believer that, sort of just like that old Starbucks coupon example, location services is going to create, a set of transformative companies. It is going to be blended, however, with social and some of these other capabilities. They're not going to be, quote, standalone check-in companies, as one person said.
So do you see it more as a feature as opposed to a platform?
I see it as an ingredient. It's a substrate that is going to be used in essentially many, many other kinds of apps.
So,
defending my point about Facebook Places as being extremely important.
In terms of what Matt said, I think for developers, commoditization is actually a good thing, right? So, we're actually in an age where you can create new kinds of services. Foursquare, GoWallet, all these things we're talking about. You can actually create these things, from scratch now, and the reason you can is because technology is becoming commodity. The key enabling technology is finally here. We've been waiting for this thing for like 15 years, right? So, the stats that jumps out to me, I think by the end of 2011, like 75% of handsets are going to be GPS enabled, something like that, right? Is that right?
Something like that.
Okay, that's really interesting. So don't limit yourself by thinking I'm building an LBS company. That's too damn boring. Go back to build something that uses that capability that's interesting and engaging to users, and you can actually get to some value creation. The example I gave you earlier is Waze. That's pretty much a utility today. We use game mechanics to do that. But what do? There's a duopoly for map data, and we use the functionality of a GPS-enabled device to create our own data set, a very, very valuable data set that other people have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year to maintain. There's other opportunities like that that are created by GPS. So don't limit yourself to saying, oh, it's a location business. I think check-ins are very early. I mean, the stats on that are like, I think, if you guys are using it, congratulations, you're like in 4% of the population. And if you're checking in every month, I think you're in 1% of the population. So that's kind of like us talking to ourselves, right? So, and that's okay, because that's what we do. But ultimately, we need somebody in the Midwest who maybe we're friends with or related to also use it. And we need, and we need our relatives of the East Coast to think about us. And that's when it starts to get interesting. So it's kind of early, but the great thing is commoditization is actually a really, really good thing. When you don't have that commoditization, that's when you're too early, and that's lonely and long. But now you can suddenly address this kind of very unique capability, and you don't need the carrier. No offense to Vodafone, but we're investors in Location Labs, which used to be called Wave Market. We've been in that deal for 9 years or so. Love the company, but they went for forever through operators, and guess what? 9 years, right? Now their business is a much more interesting business because they're interested in attracting developers. They've built a platform that's cross-carrier. They now have something, but if you're going to work through operators, they're going to stage you and make you wait. You don't have to wait for LBS. I think that's fantastic news. So I think it's actually a category where we're just at the very beginning of innovation.
I totally agree with that. I guess my comments are going to be more towards beyond 2010. But if you start connecting topologies, there's a company called EcoHow that actually connects different topologies like GPS, LBS, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Bluetooth. When you're able to triangulate three-dimensional space, you may be able to get somewhere in an automated fashion that is not B to C, possibly B to G, or specific device-centric that is not necessarily for all consumers. But and there's a company called Monticello that's doing indoor location. Monticello, excuse me. That's doing indoor, so that's something to consider as well.
I think plus one to all these, whatever these guys said. But I think there is a bigger issue is if you look at location, as John very well put, the commoditization is a great thing. But from a developer standpoint, you're in the business of building mobile experiences. They're not in the business of building infrastructure services. There will be some services which will come up. Guys like Skyhook do that, and Simple Geo is trying to do location, and other people are going to do messaging for the mobile and notifications. But at the end of the day, mobile app developers have to build great experiences to get audiences. It's sort of like it's almost like the Hollywood model. It's like building making a great movie. And making an app is exactly just that. You have a great mobile experience using all these things. You will have users. The difficult part is that getting up to 2 to 4 million people using your service might actually be easy cross-platform, but growth beyond those is going to be hard. And I think that is the big challenge of this new mobile ecosystem, is that when do you go from being just a small startup, bootstrap startup, or two guys building great mobile experiences, to being a venture-backed company. And I think there is a lot more unknowns in that space than people realize. Like, there is a lot of companies getting funded right now, but that whole idea is still pretty, I'm not sure any of the VCs actually quite know what is the answer going forward, right?
Well, there's some truth to that. I mean, I think, I've been in the VC world about 4 years, and so when I first got here, I did AdMob and GetJar, and I did nothing for 3 years because similarly, I thought the monetization models were really improving for some of the early iPhone apps, and looked at the Tapias and a bunch of the others, and I just didn't feel like they could be big, right? And so, but I have to admit, in putting my money where my mouth is, I think my optimism is dramatically changed this past 6 to 9 months. And so, whether it's MoPub that I was mentioning before, or another company called 3LM, I've actually started to do more application and consumer experience investments than I've done before. Part of it's because I believe that the mobile ad economy is now at a point you actually can make real money on the advertising. And part of it's because of the ecosystem, the richness of it is so much greater, whether it's the handsets themselves or the data that's in it or the location information. And so I just think there's a much greater chance of getting lucky than, say, even a year or 2 years ago because of how good the ingredients are. But yes, do I know for sure?
No, I think the issue which I bring up is essentially on the mobile, the attention economics work much more in a brutal sort of way because there are 500,000 apps, because there are going to be even more apps and more experiences. It's going to be very difficult for people to retain attention or actually carve out attention for using those applications. There's only a finite number of hours in a day, and you can't really keep using those. So there is an actual physical limitation of how much you can get addicted to a platform. The app I am recently addicted to is Instagram, and I may be checking it like 20 times a day. And I did the numbers. I'm using it for maybe 12 minutes in the entire day, and that is the app I am openly saying I'm addicted to, right? It's not Facebook, it's not Foursquare. I use it consistently. It has something for me to do on an ongoing basis. It's a photo app. I can see what my friends are sharing with me in terms of photos. So there's a lot to do in that. I think that attention barrier is going to be a much, I'm not trying to be negative about the sector. I love the whole idea about mobile. I think there is a reality of the mobile sector, which is attention. There is a reality is like when you build experiences, you can't build experiences for 500 million people. You build experiences for maybe 2 to 4 million people. And I think that's the key thing. And you're going to see that, Foursquare is so much hype this year. Like, maybe I've written about 40 articles about them. Forget about other people, and they're still at 5 million people. Like, I mean, activated. We don't even know how many active, right? So GoWalla is another one. 600,000 people who are actually registered with the service, and subset of that is actually using it. So that's a challenge.
I think also the optimism in this room probably comes from just open architecture. Great. We have more mobile network operators that are opening up, and the handsets and the whole architecture. Also, complexities come with open architecture, but
Which one is open?
Metro PCS is wide open.
All right, guys. So enough of location. I'm getting location down now. So let's talk about payments. It's something a little more interesting. Money. All right, so rumor, hints, right? Apple and other OEMs are looking into mobile payment systems. But I don't think any have happened in Asia yet, right? And then also, what's happening here with the payment side? What are the rumors? What do you guys, what kind of happened in 2010 and maybe a little bit to 2011? And also, so there's also, okay, so you have retail payments at point of sale, and also there's in-app payments. Those are kind of two subjects I want to cover. So that's pretty wide open.
So the world of mobile payments can largely be divided in the world of gateways for carrier billing and people trying to find on-ramps into mobile payments that don't involve the carriers. So I think the best examples of people playing in that first category of the ecosystem are Boku, Zong. Those are probably the best two examples, right? People that are doing that. And then I think, the challenge, of course, is that on average, the carrier takes roughly 40% of the rev share, which makes it pretty hard unless you're selling a virtual good, right? Because most things don't have 60% gross margin to start with, let alone giving it all to the payments guy. And so I think, until that world, liberalizes to a much lower taxation rate, as it were, the world of mobile payments, I think, is going to be relatively constrained. So I think that a lot of the Bokus and the Zongs and other guys are trying to get you towards PayPal or credit card or other types of loading mechanisms, which is a much cheaper 3 to 4%. I don't think, and maybe hear from a few others here, but I don't think the operators are going to liberalize or reduce their rates fast enough to be the ultimate answer. So I think most of those gateway businesses, as I call them, which is basically passing through the operator, are going to be as much positive press as are about them. They're probably not, in my personal opinion, I could be very well wrong, the breakout businesses in the space. So I think someone that can figure out a way to unload value coming outside the carrier billing space is someone that I think could be really interesting, but frankly, I haven't seen it yet.
There's another route that could happen is the gaming companies that, like the Zyngas and everything, all those, they have their payment systems already from multiple different types of vendors. Those vendors, like Rich mentioned, seem to be entering the mobile space more productively than the other companies that just came out to be mobile payments. So there could be two migration paths there from the mobile operator and the gaming company.
I have 5 people who I think will play in mobile payments apart from the carriers, and I don't know how carriers actually play long term. I think Amazon, Apple, PayPal, Facebook, and there's this, I forgot the name of this company. Come to me. It's a New York-based company, and
Paymo.
No, not Venmo. Not Square.
The one using SS7 billing as the back end? Or
Yeah.
Paymo.
No, payphone.
Payphone. Those are the 4 or 5 companies I think will actually have a big impact in the payment space. There's all these other folks who are out there. I mean, it's not really clear what distinguishes one from the other. I think that is a little bit of a challenge. But I think Amazon is going to be a big player. I think they've just gone under the radar, at least in the U.S.
Exactly. This is where geography matters a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because it's totally irrelevant outside of the U.S., but the U.S. yes.
Yeah.
Cool, so the hints that we saw, the rumors, stuff from Apple hiring NFC guys and mobile payment gurus.
We'll all be
So,
They're all rumors. No, I think everybody in the ecosystem is looking at payments, so it's safe to say that all the OEMs right now and next year are going to be looking at NFC and other kinds of payment options. All the operators are looking at payment options. I mean, a bunch of initiatives have already come out publicly, right? So Verizon has an NFC.
Well, what does that,
initiative,
just to push you, what does that mean? I mean, what does the NFC, everyone talks about initiatives in it.
Yeah, I think it's
broad
just
scale readers and clients out there is, we've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, everybody likes to talk about, well, it's huge in Japan, right? It's big in Japan only because the whole ecosystem, NTT came in and had to build out, they paid for the whole ecosystem to get it going to seed the market. So in the U.S., the whole, it's a catch-22, right? U.S. and other countries, who's going to pay for who's going to, for the infrastructure to enable NFC and other types of payments?
No one. That's why
When
we don't believe it.
Walmart was dictating standards in RFID.
Well, I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say no one. So it's not necessarily a hardware pain point. So it could be there's software-based solutions, etc. But anyway, I mean the point is I think everybody, operators, operators/carriers, OEMs. There's a ton of startups in this space. I think it's already a big kind of theme for 2010. It's going to be a really big theme for next year as well.
Okay. In-app payments, maybe? I think the Zongs, the Bokus, those guys made a lot of buzz this year. Anything?
We did an investment, as I said before, in a company called PlaySpan. So they're part of Facebook credits. We looked at the space, et cetera. We're working with folks like Boku, Zong. From an operator's point of view, I mean, the intention of an operator is not to try to tax richest startup companies for 30, 40%. That's not really what an operator is about. We don't want to have every kind of a good physical good and virtual goods on an operator's bill just so we can take a tax. That's not the view of an operator at all. So we're more than happy to go through outside partners like PayPal, et cetera, other payment options. Again, it's not our core business is providing connectivity, not trying to take a tax out of somebody else buying something based on our billing relationship.
Did you talk to Verizon guys? They don't think their business is connectivity. They think they're a software company and a media company and like payments company. You know, they're your partners, right?
Bloggers.
They're
Yeah,
bloggers.
It's like how does it?
Was there an actual question in there?
No, the question, that was an acquisition, like I was saying. You seem to know that you're in the business of connectivity. The carriers, like the people in charge, don't seem to really know that. Like, you know, whether it's Verizon CEO or the Sprint guys or AT&T, they all want to run software companies they want to develop apps and they want to do payments and they want to do everything, which they've been trying to do for the last 20 years.
I think in all fairness, the carriers have liberalized a lot.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
In all fairness, I mean, they have.
We're picking on the only carrier representative we have.
Exactly.
Yeah, is there any other representatives from the carrier industry here? No, see.
That was good.
You're all so smart, I'm sorry.
Innovation, right? Like great, they talk about setting up, you know, big innovation centers in the valley. Not a single one of them is there.
Owen and I were talking about this. Why isn't Sprint or AT&T here? They've committed to the valley, right? Their resources, brick and mortar.
It's only one resource, and they're probably at the all things D.
All right.
So, okay, so payments, interesting. So, let's kind of move it forward. Let's talk about platforms. So, something interesting happened this year, and I saw it at Yahoo, and I've seen it at GetJar, where Android is starting to outpace iPhone. And that's just in terms of usage, page views, global footprint perspective. So, kind of elaborate on that a little bit on the platform side, and how did that happen? All of a sudden, it's like, you know, did we see that coming?
Well, I don't know that even, I don't know we need to say anything. I think when we saw everyone raise their hands, they kind of told us already where the market is, right? So the leading edge of the market's here. So the big news in 2010 is I think everybody realized you need, you know, there's a second platform in town and you need to develop for that second platform. It's called Android. And I think we've known that for quite a while. It's just that the media's caught up to it in the last, you know, quarter or two. But if you look at where, you know, development dollars have been going for the last 12 months, it's clearly a two-horse race with Android gaining in terms of just, you know, overall share. That's not necessarily to say that, you know, Apple's in trouble. They have a you know, they have a more profitable model than maybe Android does long term. But I mean, if you're looking at sort of just addressable market, it's a two-horse race, and it's been a two-horse race for a while.
I think there's a macro theme to look at here, is that Linux seems to be taking some market share. So if we look at Linux on the desktop and on the server base, they obviously are winning in server over Microsoft. So why can't Linux win in handsets? I mean, if you got Palm, Migo, and Android all creating, there's going to be other ones that could pop up as well. So it seems like Linux has some momentum force here.
Are you guys surprised that 27 handsets around the world and versus one company with one model is actually gaining market share? Like, it's like, why is that such a big surprise for people?
Right.
And you know, in all fairness to Apple, they still have a better user experience than Android is, right? Android is essentially the Google philosophy of constantly releasing beta all the time. From an end user perspective, you know, it is a pretty frustrating experience, is that every phone is the greatest Android phone you will ever own. Like Nexus 1, Nexus S, you know, Galaxy X or S or something. You know, you buy the iPhone, you like it or you hate it. It's pretty binary, right? And that's the key thing. And I think that is the real story. There is two kinds of, you know, phone experience. People who will go for the iPhone experience and the people who will go for the Android experience. I won't rule out Nokia just yet. You know, maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
You all people do it. When you roll them out,
You know, I think because they do sell, you know, hundreds of millions of phones every year, And even if they keep contracting, they will eventually catch up to the reality of the marketplace today. I don't think, I look, it's taken me a lot to use Nokia phones again, right? So I wouldn't say that like I'm a big Nokia fanboy, but I think we can't rule them out. And I think I would not rule out the BlackBerry guys just yet. There may be they have one shot at like coming back with something interesting. If not, I think then they're toast. So yes, it is a two-horse race.
I never got a chance to ask you a question. How about Windows 7?
I like Windows 7, just haven't buy it.
All right, guys. So we've been sitting down for an hour, so I think people are getting a little restless. So let's kind of bring it into scope here. So international activity. So let's look at mobile not from our microscopic view in Silicon Valley, that tunnel vision that sometimes we get, but let's kind of open it up globally and let's look at Asia Pacific, at the America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and kind of give your insights on what's been happening in 2010. I know some of you guys have a good background on international emerging markets, so it could be a good take for the folks in Silicon Valley here to understand what's happening globally from a different perspective, because not everyone has iPhone and Android globally, but so those markets are a little different.
I think just to come back to your question about Android, I think that is actually the story of what's happening in emerging markets as well. Right? I think in market share numbers that are far more impressive than I would have guessed. I think you're starting to get, even in emerging markets, 15, 20, 25% market share of Android devices, which I thought would take much longer to get there. I thought Java devices and feature phones would survive for much longer in markets like India and Indonesia. So I think that Android story, that wave, is one that this is all good news. Right? It's all pumping oxygen into the room for the most part. For most of us that are trying to build services or applications on top. So I think it's really, really exciting to see. Obviously, just the raw user growth in markets like India and Indonesia are the other really interesting things to see.
Joe, in China?
I think I spent about 40% of my time in China in the last 12 months, and that's traveling from the major cities to the small cities, and meeting with developers and developer communities and investment community. So it's all spectrum, all mobile operators. Their development path right now in 2010 has been Android #1, Symbian #2, feature phones #3, and we'll do Apple if we have the resources and it's easy. That's kind of what that's the way they tend to think. So it definitely, I don't know, if it's because Google has more relationship, with handset manufacturers that could enter China faster, or if it's that they cultivate the developer community better than Apple has been in the past. But definitely it's Google, Symbian, feature phone, and a one-off on Apple.
So what we do as a firm is, so at the camp, I'm a mobile guy. So we started the firm with sort of coming from the industry. And so there's really 3 places where we operate all the time. So here, Korea, and China. And we don't wait where we're going to invest. We just kind of look where we think innovation is going to come. And in mobile, what's been great is you could actually see the cycles of innovation happening kind of the center of innovation actually has moved in this industry almost from the very beginning. And I think the big news, actually, from my perspective, is whereas there was innovation in Japan, then there was innovation in Korea. Actually, the innovation center is right here. So even though we're talking about sort of the operating systems people are building to, what's really interesting is that for the first time in a long time, we're the defining edge of what services are going to be rolled out in places like China when they finally have 3G. And so it's actually a very, very interesting time. I've actually not seen this in 12, 15 years where we actually are at the innovation center. So I actually think there's less innovation elsewhere than there is here, where I used to have to spend an inordinate amount of time in like in Seoul, or places like that, and I don't really need to go. That people will come here because this is actually where the innovation is happening, and that's great news for the people in the audience.
I think, John, just as a question,
Yeah.
One of the things I recently wrote about was the next 12 months are about 3G in basically the emerging telecom markets, right? And when that happens, the notion of mobile web is turned on its head, right? So when there is, 250 million Indians on 3G and 100 million Indonesians trying to get on their 3G phones, the whole mobile web experience starts to change. Do you feel that the mobile innovation would shift one more time to these new markets because they will have the scale, the speed, and also these low-cost smartphones to actually start having an impact?
So, as I said earlier, I really think that for service layer to actually have innovation, you have to have commoditization. And it's painful to watch sort of spectrum allocation. It's painful to watch handset penetration sort of evolve. Like if you're too ahead of those layers, innovation just doesn't happen, and you lose a lot of money. I think it's going to take more time for China to catch up. It's going to take more time for India to catch up. They're going to go through all the pain that we actually went through as a sort of a second. We were like we were a tier 2 country when it came to mobile for a long time, and that's not the case now. So they have to go through that cycle that we're just coming out of. So I don't really see the switch happening there. I think this goes to predictions, so I'll just go to what I care about in predictions, or can we do that now? I think the big thing that I'm most interested in, so I think we're at the adoptive, we're defining sort of where things are going to go, and my hope and my prediction for 2011 is really we finally start to, by the end of 2011, really start to see HTML5 as an abstraction layer that is pretty darn competitive with native apps. And the reason I think that's important is, to your question, I think that gives us a chance, this market, this innovation center, to actually define the next wave of the true next wave of internet consumption, where it really does become mobile. I do think it ultimately becomes mobile. Therefore, I would like to see more innovation on the browser side than where we are today. That's not that I have any kind of political issue with downloadables or anything like that, just what's your broadest addressable market, and that is very much looking at it like a VC, I will admit, but that's my job.
I totally echo John's note on respect to the mobile industry or the innovation that's coming out of the mobile industry. The world is looking at Silicon Valley now, and that has, as we know, has not been the case in the past. So China is definitely leaning on Silicon Valley for more and more innovation. When it comes to where they are with innovation and all the issues associated with that, them trying to come up with their local applications with their 3G network, I think they'll come up with local applications, but not in magnitude of horizontal ones that will, make a wave overseas. I think there is a lot of time that will happen in 2 to 3 years, where they are a bit behind us. I think there is a different tectonic shift from them doing mergers and acquisitions, though. They're starting to become, and this is specifically China, more sophisticated in finance and exchanges, so they don't need to throw their technology companies, on our exchanges here in the United States. And they're going to start doing more acquisitions in the United States, where it's always been, in the past, they jump on our exchanges to make money for their corporations, and then we buy their corporations to expand international business for getting to their marketplace. I think companies like Tencent will start making their roots into the United States and start showing us a thing or two about how horizontal plays in respect to chat and virtual goods that might come up. But I don't know. I mean, I think we're in a great spot here right now in Silicon Valley, so take advantage of it.
All right, guys. Let's get our crystal balls out now, and let's focus on 2011 predictions. So this is pretty free form. So now you kind of have some specialties in your area. So what do you guys predict in 2011? What's the big news? Let's go Matt. You can start off, Matt.
Okay, I'll start out with one. So one thing I think we've been seeing as an operator, a lot of security threats, so in the hundreds of millions. So I think next year we'll have some sort of hacker attack, a virus that will take over through a bunch of applications and spread and shut down people's devices, etc. We haven't really seen that, but I think that will happen to be a big news story in 2011.
What a downer. Tell us your one prediction, your one chance.
No, I said that was my first one.
Next year.
Well, it's an opportunity,
I know,
right?
I know it is.
Security.
So companies like Lookout and things like that might have an
Yes,
opportunity.
yeah, exactly.
You, Rich?
It's the themes I think we've talked about all night. So I think Android's going to rise to become sort of the dominant smartphone OS. I think it already is in a lot of metrics. I think it's going to accelerate awesomely. I think Nokia and RIM are in pretty tough shape. You have Motorola using an Android strategy, going aggressively after these guys. You look at the Droid Pro ads.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive to see how they've revitalized themselves. And I think there's going to be, as I said all night, another wave in mobile advertising innovation, which I think continues to be strategically important because it is actually the monetization path for so many of the independent developers out there. So if you can get that right, hopefully those companies will become strategically valuable as well.
So Nokia and Intel have a little secret weapon they've been working on called Ego. And what are you guys' thoughts with that? I mean, will that be the news of 2011? Good or bad?
I think it's going to be tough, right? I mean, I think the hypothesis, or at least what I've heard, is that the first quote MiGo devices are going to ship basically in the holiday of this next year, as I understand. Oh man, better than me, right? I think that's right, right?
And that's also going to be a tablet, not a phone.
Right. So it's sort of when are we actually going to see mass market phones, right? So it's like it or not, a lot of what makes these platforms successful is the developer community and the energy that's around it. So if I tell you that the platform I want you to start thinking about is not going to ship a mass market phone until maybe summer of 2012, call me, set the alarm clock when that happens, right? Then I'll start thinking about it then. So as a result, I think it's going to be hard for them to build major momentum. Now, caveats are, of course, India, certain third world markets where they have dominant market share of Symbian today. There may be opportunities, I think, for them to establish a control position there. But Western Europe, United States, I think it's going to be rough for MiGo.
Just a one-off on MiGo. I think version 1, version 2, yeah, you can judge it and be critical, and it's not going to be on that many devices. But I think the plan is to be cross-platform. Or I've been chastised once on this table for thinking a cross-platform. I think they're trying to do automobile, handset, tablet, all the different devices, TV. So I think they'll try to do it better the first time so they have less iterations later on. I don't know specifically, I'm not internally there, but that's my MiGo take.
So I'll reiterate my prediction earlier. So you now have Android pulling ahead of iPhone as a development platform. I think HTML5 becomes much more competitive, much more viable for a larger percentage of the applications than we previously thought. So I think that there's a third, and I'm very hopeful for that because I think that gives you a bridge to launch a company more effectively, to iterate like you need to iterate in a more web-like environment, which is what's been lacking. So I think that's helpful, and then I think ultimately it gets you potentially to a larger addressable market over time. So I actually think that can start to become a very significant option for more and more developers in 2011.
So I have actually two-part prediction. Samsung becomes the #2 smartphone player and individual brand in the world, mostly because they own the entire component ecosystem. They own the processors, memory, screens, and the manufacturing. And as a rider to that is that you're going to see Motorola start to dwindle away in 2011. I know it's a pretty radical.
Say that again?
I said Motorola will start to dwindle away in 2011, mostly because Samsung will become a much more dominant player. And I have a wild, out of the left field prediction that X3 by Nokia will be one of the best selling phones of 2011.
The X3. You want to hold that up, the X3?
Gig is now running a hedge fund.
Could be accurate.
This is great.
Mario, 2011, that's pretty close close to us here in the timeline. I think we're trained in Silicon Valley to think 3 to 5 out. But I think a simple one is LTE. Well, we'll see all this branding and everything, LTE on billboards and television. So that's almost a given. Another one is, I guess, what I'm hoping for is voice recognition. If tablets take a pervasive role, then maybe we can start doing some input with voice recognition, and those companies will start to get some sales.
Cool. I think that's a wrap, guys. Well, who's left? Did you get Matt? No, you got yours.
People are sitting on the edge of their seats to hear my second prediction.
Second prediction? Nostradamus, okay. Nostramat. All right, guys. Find us at mobilemonday.us. We'll be posting this up.